Nathan Cole wiped the sweat from his forehead as he tightened the last bolt on the energy relay. The air around him buzzed faintly with electricity, a sign that the machine was finally holding together after weeks of constant malfunctions. He stood up, stretching his stiff back, and glanced at the horizon. The sun was setting over the rocky terrain of the mining outpost, painting the sky in shades of orange and red. It was beautiful, but Nathan didn't have time to enjoy it. There were too many things to worry about. The outpost wasn't much, just a cluster of prefab buildings surrounded by jagged cliffs and endless stretches of barren land. It was one of dozens scattered across this desolate planet, all working tirelessly to extract rare minerals needed for Earth's survival. But lately, things had been going wrong. Equipment failures, supply shortages, and now rumors of trouble brewing beyond their borders. Nathan sighed. He was just a technician, not a soldier or a leader. All he wanted was to fix things and keep his head down. Inside the control room, voices carried through the thin walls. Nathan could hear people talking nervously about something big heading their way. He frowned. Normally, conversations like these were just idle gossip, but today there was an edge to their tone, a mix of fear and dread that made him uneasy. Pushing open the door, he stepped inside and saw a group of workers huddled around a small screen showing a live feed from one of the outpost's surveillance drones. "What's going on?" Nathan asked, leaning closer to get a better look. "It's Vraxcore," said one of the men, his voice trembling. "The Empress sent it." Nathan felt a chill run down his spine. He had heard stories about Vraxcore, the dragon-like beast that served the Empress of Xyrith. She ruled over a neighboring star system with an iron fist, crushing anyone who dared oppose her. Her armies were feared throughout the galaxy, but none struck more terror into people's hearts than Vraxcore. Stories described it as a monster, with wings wide enough to block out the sun, claws sharp enough to tear through steel, and eyes that glowed like molten lava. Some even claimed it could breathe fire hot enough to melt mountains. "Why would she send it here?" Nathan asked, trying to keep his voice steady. "They say we're getting too close to her territory," another worker replied. "She doesn't want us digging around anymore. If we don't stop, she'll destroy us." Nathan shook his head. This couldn't be happening. They were just miners trying to survive. What threat could they possibly pose to someone like the Empress? Still, he knew better than to dismiss the warnings. People who underestimated the Empress usually ended up dead, or worse. The room fell silent as the drone footage zoomed in on a dark shape moving across the landscape. At first it looked like a shadow, but as it drew closer, details became clearer. Enormous wings stretched wide, catching the wind as the creature glided effortlessly above the ground. Its body shimmered with iridescent scales that reflected the fading sunlight, making it seem almost magical. And then there were its eyes, bright, glowing orbs that scanned the area below with predatory precision. "That's it," someone whispered. "It's coming for us." Panic erupted in the control room. Workers scrambled to grab whatever weapons they could find, though everyone knew guns and makeshift tools wouldn't stand a chance against something like Vraxcore. Others argued about whether they should try to evacuate or stay and defend the outpost. Nathan stayed quiet, watching the chaos unfold around him. He knew running wouldn't help. By the time they got far enough away, Vraxcore would already be upon them. Staying to fight seemed equally hopeless. There had to be another way. As the argument grew louder, Nathan slipped out of the room unnoticed. His mind raced as he walked toward the edge of the outpost, where the rocky plains stretched endlessly into the distance. He couldn't shake the image of Vraxcore from his thoughts. It was terrifying, yes, but also strangely fascinating. Creatures like that didn't exist naturally. They were engineered, designed to serve a purpose. Maybe, just maybe, there was a way to reason with it. Nathan reached the storage shed where he kept his tools and supplies. Grabbing a backpack, he stuffed it with anything he thought might come in handy: spare parts, wires, a portable power source, and a few gadgets he'd been tinkering with. Then he paused, pulling out a small device he'd been working on earlier. It was a prototype, a glowing orb meant to stabilize energy fields. He hadn't finished testing it yet, but it was the best thing he had. Taking a deep breath, Nathan slung the backpack over his shoulder and headed out into the wilderness. The ground beneath his boots was rough and uneven, littered with rocks and patches of dry grass. As he moved farther from the outpost, the noise faded, replaced by an eerie silence. The only sounds were the crunch of gravel underfoot and the occasional gust of wind whistling through the cliffs. He didn't have to walk far before he spotted Vraxkor. The beast landed gracefully a short distance away, its massive form casting a long shadow across the ground. For a moment, Nathan froze, staring at the creature in awe. Up close, it was even more impressive and more intimidating than he'd imagined. Its scales shifted colors slightly with each movement, and the air around it seemed charged with energy. Summoning every ounce of courage, Nathan raised his hands slowly, palms facing outward in a gesture of peace. "I'm not your enemy," he called out, his voice shaking but loud enough to carry. "I don't want to fight you." Vraxkor tilted its head, studying him curiously. Its glowing eyes narrowed slightly as if weighing his words. Nathan held his ground, refusing to look away despite the fear coursing through him. After what felt like an eternity, the beast let out a low growl that vibrated through the ground, beneath his feet. It wasn't aggressive exactly, but it wasn't friendly either. Deciding to take a risk, Nathan reached into his backpack and pulled out the glowing orb. Holding it carefully in front of him, he took a cautious step forward. "This is mine," he said softly. "I made it. It's peaceful." Vraxkor watched him intently, its tail flicking slightly behind it. Encouraged by the lack of immediate attack, Nathan took another step, then another, until he was close enough to see the intricate patterns etched into the beast's metallic collar. That's when it hit him. The collar wasn't just decoration. It was some kind of control mechanism, likely used by the Empress to command Vraxkor's actions. A spark of determination ignited within Nathan. If he could disable the collar, maybe, just maybe, he could free the beast from the Empress's influence. And if he succeeded, perhaps they could work together to protect the outpost instead of destroying it. It was a long shot, but right, now it was the only plan he had. Slowly, carefully, Nathan extended his hand toward the collar, keeping his movements deliberate and calm. Vraxkor tensed, letting out a warning hiss, but didn't strike. Nathan exhaled sharply, realizing the creature was giving him a chance to prove himself. With trembling fingers, he began examining the collar, searching for a way to deactivate it. Time seemed to slow as he worked, every second stretching longer than the last. Behind him, the distant hum of the outpost's defenses reminded him of what was at stake. If he failed, everyone back there would die. But if he succeeded, well, that was a future worth fighting for. And so, under the watchful gaze of the dragon-like beast, Nathan Cole prepared to change the course of his life, and possibly the fate of the entire outpost. Nathan's fingers trembled as he worked on the metallic collar around Vraxkor's neck. The dragon-like beast stood still, its glowing eyes fixed on him, watching his every move. He could feel the weight of those eyes, sharp and unblinking, like they were trying to decide whether he was friend or foe. Nathan tried to focus, but it wasn't easy. His hands were sweaty, and his heart pounded so hard he thought Vraxkor might hear it. Still, he kept going, determined not to give up. The collar was unlike anything Nathan had ever seen before. It was sleek and smooth, with tiny lights pulsing in a rhythmic pattern along its surface. Nathan guessed these lights were signals from the Empress, commands sent remotely to control Vraxkor's actions. If he could disrupt those signals, maybe he could free the beast. But how? The device in his hand, the glowing orb, was experimental, designed to stabilize energy fields. Maybe, just maybe, it could interfere with the collar's systems. Taking a deep breath, Nathan pressed the orb against the collar. At first, nothing happened. Then slowly, the pulsing lights began to flicker. Vraxkor let out a low growl, shifting, its massive body uneasily. Nathan froze, afraid he'd made a mistake. But instead of attacking, the beast lowered its head slightly, almost as if it was curious about what he was doing. Encouraged, Nathan adjusted the orb, twisting a small dial on its side. The flickering grew more erratic until suddenly, the IR lights went out completely. For a moment, everything was silent. Nathan held his breath, waiting for some kind of reaction. Vraxcore lifted its head, shook it once, and then turned to look at Nathan. There was something different in its gaze now, less wary, more thoughtful. It was as if the creature understood what Nathan had done. The realization hit him like a punch to the gut. Vraxcore wasn't just a mindless weapon, it was intelligent. Trapped, controlled, and forced to do the Empress's bidding, but intelligent all the same. "You're not her slave anymore," Nathan whispered, more to himself than to the beast. "Not if I can help it." Vraxcore tilted its head again, studying him closely. Then, to Nathan's surprise, the dragon-like creature lowered itself to the ground, folding its wings neatly against its sides. It was an invitation, or at least, that's how Nathan interpreted it. Hesitating for only a second, he stepped closer and climbed onto Vraxcore's back. The scales beneath him were warm and smooth, surprisingly comfortable despite their size. As soon as he settled into place, Vraxcore rose to its full height, spreading its enormous wings wide. Nathan gripped tightly as Vraxcore launched itself into the air. The wind rushed past him, whipping his hair into a frenzy as they soared higher and higher. For a moment, fear overwhelmed him. What if Vraxcore decided to drop him? What if this was all some elaborate trick? But as they flew over the outpost below, Nathan realized something important. Vraxcore wasn't attacking. It was showing him the world from above, giving him a new perspective. And for the first time since hearing about the Empress's plans, Nathan felt a glimmer of hope. When they landed near the outpost, Nathan slid off Vraxcore's back, his legs wobbly from the flight. Workers poured out of the buildings, staring in disbelief at the sight of the dragon-like beast standing calmly beside him. Some raised weapons, ready to defend themselves, while others simply gawked, unable to process what they were seeing. "Stand down," Nathan shouted, raising his hands to signal peace. "It's okay. Vraxcore isn't here to hurt us." No one moved. Tension hung thick in the air as everyone waited to see what would happen next. Slowly, deliberately, Nathan walked toward the crowd, leaving Vraxcore behind. The beast didn't follow, staying where it was as if it trusted Nathan to handle things. "He's telling the truth," Nathan continued, his voice steady despite the nervous energy coursing through him. "I disabled the collar. Vraxcore isn't under the Empress's control anymore. We can work together." Murmurs rippled through the group. Some people looked skeptical, while others seemed intrigued by the idea. One woman stepped forward, a Albiba mechanic named Clara, who often helped Nathan with repairs. She crossed her arms and narrowed her eyes. "And why should we believe you?" she asked, her tone sharp but not hostile. "That thing's been programmed to kill. How do we know it won't turn on us the second it gets the chance?" Nathan hesitated. He couldn't blame them for being cautious. If their roles were reversed, he probably wouldn't trust himself either. But he also knew he had to convince them somehow. Without Vraxcore's help, the outpost wouldn't stand a chance against the Empress's forces. "I don't expect you to take my word for it," he said finally. "But think about it. If Vraxcore wanted to destroy us, it would have done it, already. Instead, it let me disable the collar. It brought me back here instead of killing me. That has to mean something." Clara frowned, considering his words. After a long pause, she nodded slowly. "All right," she said. "Let's say you're right. What's your plan? You think having a giant dragon on our side is enough to stop the Empress?" "It's not just about stopping her," Nathan replied. "It's about proving we're not helpless. If we show her that we can fight back, maybe she'll leave us alone, and if she doesn't..." He glanced over his shoulder at Vraxcore, who was watching the exchange silently. "We'll deal with that when it comes." The group exchanged uncertain looks, but no one argued further. For now, at least, they were willing to give Nathan and Vraxcore a chance. Over the next few hours, Nathan explained everything that had happened, from disabling the collar to riding Vraxcore back to the outpost. People listened intently, asking questions and offering suggestions. By the time the meeting ended, a fragile sense of unity had formed among the workers. They weren't just miners anymore. They were survivors, bound together by a shared purpose. As night fell, Nathan returned to Vraxkor, who was resting near the edge of the outpost. The beast's presence was both comforting and intimidating, a constant reminder of the stakes they faced. Sitting down beside it, Nathan pulled out the glowing orb and examined it closely. The device had worked better than he'd expected, but he knew it was only a temporary fix. Sooner or later, the Empress would find a way to regain control of Vraxkor, or send something even worse. "We've got a lot to figure out," Nathan muttered, half to himself and half to the beast. "But if anyone can do it, it's us." Vraxkor let out a soft rumble, almost like a purr, and nudged Nathan gently with its snout. It was a small gesture, but it meant everything. In that moment, Nathan knew they were in this together, not just as allies, but as friends. Whatever challenges lay ahead, they would face them side by side. Over the next few days, life at the outpost changed dramatically. People worked tirelessly to prepare for the inevitable confrontation with the Empress's forces. Weapons were repaired, defenses reinforced, and strategies planned. Meanwhile, Nathan spent most of his time with Vraxkor, learning more about the beast and finding ways to strengthen their bond. Each day brought new discoveries, from subtle changes in Vraxkor's behavior to improvements in the glowing orb's functionality. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, Nathan sat atop a hill overlooking the outpost. Vraxkor rested nearby, its massive form silhouetted against the darkening sky. The sight filled Nathan with a mix of pride and determination. They had come so far in such a short time, but the hardest part was yet to come. The Empress wouldn't give up easily, and neither would they. "We'll be ready," Nathan said softly, patting Vraxkor's side. "Whatever happens, we'll be ready." And with that promise echoing in his mind, Nathan turned his attention back to the outpost, already thinking about what needed to be done next. The days that followed were a blur of activity. Nathan and the others worked tirelessly, preparing for the inevitable attack from the Empress's forces. The outpost buzzed with energy as people carried out their tasks, driven by a mix of fear and determination. Vraxkor became a constant presence, its massive form looming over the landscape like a guardian. At first, many of the workers kept their distance, unsure of how much they could trust the dragon-like beast. But as time went on, they began to see it differently, not as a monster, but as an ally. Nathan spent most of his time with Vraxkor, learning how to communicate with the creature. It wasn't easy. Vraxkor didn't speak in words, but it had its own way of expressing itself, through growls, gestures, and subtle shifts in posture. Nathan quickly realized that patience was key. He started small, using simple commands like stay or come, rewarding the beast with pieces of scrap metal it seemed to enjoy chewing on. Over time, Vraxkor responded more consistently, proving that it understood far more than anyone had expected. One morning, Nathan decided to test their bond further. He climbed onto Vraxkor's back and guided it toward the edge of the outpost. There, he pointed to a distant rock formation and said, "Go there." Vraxkor hesitated for a moment, then spread its wings and took off, carrying Nathan high into the air. They flew smoothly, the wind rushing past them as they soared over the barren terrain. When they reached the rocks, Nathan patted Vraxkor's neck and said, "Good job." The beast let out a low rumble, almost like a contented sigh. Back at the outpost, Clara approached Nathan, her arms crossed and a skeptical look on her face. "You really think this is going to work?" she asked, nodding toward Vraxkor. "Even if we can trust it, one dragon isn't going to stop an entire army." "We don't need it to stop an army," Nathan replied. "We just need it to give us an edge. With Vraxkor on our side, we can hit them where it hurts and make them think twice about attacking us again." Clara frowned but didn't argue. She had seen the way Vraxkor responded to Nathan and couldn't deny that the beast seemed different now, less menacing, more cooperative. Still, she worried about what might happen when the real fight began. Would Vraxkor stay loyal, or would the Empress find a way to reclaim it? For now, all they could do was hope for the best and prepare for the worst. As the days passed, Nathan continued tinkering with the glowing orb. He knew disabling the collar had been a temporary solution at best. The Empress's technology was advanced, and it wouldn't take long for her to figure out what he'd done. To prevent that, Nathan needed to make the disruption permanent. He spent hours studying the collar, examining every detail and testing new ideas. Finally, he came up with a plan. He would modify the orb to emit a constant signal, jamming any attempts to reactivate the collar. It wasn't a perfect solution, but it was the best he could do with the resources available. With Clara's help, Nathan gathered the necessary materials and set to work. They stayed up late into the night soldering wires and calibrating circuits until the device was ready. When they tested it, the results were promising. The collar remained inactive, even when exposed to simulated control signals. For the first time in days, Nathan allowed himself to feel a glimmer of optimism. But their preparations weren't limited to Vraxcore and the orb. The workers fortified the outpost, building barricades and setting traps around the perimeter. They repaired old weapons and scavenged parts to create new ones. Some even practiced combat drills, though most of them had never held a weapon before. It was clear that none of them were soldiers, but they were determined to defend their home, no matter what. Despite the chaos, moments of camaraderie began to emerge. People shared stories during meals, laughed together during breaks, and supported one another through the challenges they faced. Even those who had once been strangers found themselves growing closer, united by a common goal. Nathan noticed the change and felt a sense of pride. These were ordinary people, miners, mechanics, and technicians, but they were proving that courage wasn't about being fearless. It was about standing your ground even when you were scared. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, Nathan stood beside Vraxcore watching the sky turn shades of purple and orange. The dragon-like beast stretched its wings lazily, basking in the cool breeze. Nathan leaned against its side, feeling the warmth radiating from its scales. For a moment, he let himself imagine a future beyond the conflict, a world where humans and creatures like Vraxcore could coexist peacefully. It was a nice thought, but he knew they had a long way to go before that dream could become reality. "Do you miss flying?" Nathan asked softly, patting Vraxcore's shoulder. The beast tilted its head as if considering the question, then nudged him gently. Nathan chuckled. "I'll take that as a yes." Just then, a shout rang out from the direction of the outpost. Nathan turned to see one of the workers running toward him, waving frantically. "Nathan, you need to come quick," the man called. "Something's happening." Heart pounding, Nathan hurried back to the outpost with Vraxcore following close, behind. Inside the control room, a group of people had gathered around the surveillance screens. On one of them, a fleet of drones was visible, moving steadily across the landscape. Their sleek metallic bodies gleamed in the moonlight, and their movements were synchronized, almost mechanical. Everyone knew what this meant. The Empress had sent reinforcements. "They're heading straight for us," Clara said grimly, pointing to the screen. "We've got maybe an hour before they get here." Panic rippled through the room, but Nathan forced himself to stay calm. "All right, everyone," he said, raising his voice to be heard over the murmurs. "This is it. We've prepared for this moment, and we're not going down without a fight. Stick to the plan, and remember, we're stronger together." The workers nodded, their expressions resolute despite the fear in their eyes. Nathan glanced at Vraxcore, who stood silently beside him, its glowing eyes fixed on the screen. "Ready for this?" he asked quietly. The beast let out a low growl, its tail flicking slightly. Nathan smiled faintly. "Me too." Over the next hour, the outpost sprang into action. Barricades were manned, weapons distributed, and final checks made to ensure everything was in place. Nathan stayed busy, double-checking the modifications to the orb and making sure Vraxcore was ready. As the minutes ticked by, tension mounted. The hum of the approaching drones grew louder, a constant reminder of what was coming. When the first wave of drones arrived, the battle began. They descended upon the outpost like a swarm of insects, firing beams of energy that shattered windows and scorched the ground. The workers fought back with everything they had, using makeshift weapons and traps to take down as many drones as possible. Explosions lit up the night sky, and the air was filled with the sounds of gunfire and shouting. Through it all, Nathan and Vraxkor moved as one. Riding atop the dragon-like beast, Nathan directed Vraxkor toward the largest concentrations of drones, using its strength and speed to devastating effect. With each pass, Vraxkor unleashed powerful roars that sent shockwaves through the air, knocking drones out of the sky. Nathan cheered, urging the beast onward as they carved a path through the enemy forces. But the drones kept coming, relentless and unyielding. Just when it seemed like the outpost might fall, Nathan spotted something. A cluster of larger drones hovering near the rear of the formation. These weren't standard models. They were command units, likely controlling the smaller drones remotely. If they could disable them, the rest of the fleet would falter. "Vraxkor, follow me!" Nathan shouted, pointing to the command units. The beast roared in response, banking sharply and soaring toward the target. As they closed in, Nathan pulled out the modified orb and activated it, aiming it at the nearest command unit. A burst of energy shot out, striking the drone and causing it to explode in a shower of sparks. One by one, the other command units fell, their destruction sending ripples through the fleet. Without guidance, the remaining drones faltered, giving the workers a chance to regroup and counterattack. By the time the dust settled, the outpost was battered but still standing. The workers cheered, exhausted but triumphant. Nathan slid off Vraxkor's back, his body aching from the fight but his spirit soaring. He looked at the dragon-like beast, gratitude shining in his eyes. "We did it," he said, his voice hoarse, but full of pride. "We actually did it." Vraxkor let out a soft rumble, lowering its head to nuzzle Nathan gently. In that moment, Nathan knew their bond was stronger than ever. Together, they had faced impossible odds and emerged victorious. But deep down, he also knew this was only the beginning. The Empress wouldn't stop, not after this. And when she came back, they would have to be ready. As dawn broke over the horizon, painting the sky in hues of gold and pink, Nathan stood beside Vraxkor, gazing out at the damaged outpost. The road ahead would be difficult, but they had proven something important. They weren't powerless. With unity, courage, and a little bit of ingenuity, they could stand against even the greatest threats. And with Vraxkor by his side, Nathan felt ready to face whatever came next. The victory at the outpost was bittersweet. The workers celebrated their success, but the cost of the battle was impossible to ignore. Buildings were damaged, equipment destroyed, and several people injured. Nathan walked through the wreckage, his boots crunching over broken glass and charred debris. He felt a mix of pride and guilt. Pride in what they had accomplished, but guilt for the destruction left in its wake. Still, there was no time to dwell on it. The Empress's forces had retreated, but everyone knew this wasn't over. Not by a long shot. Vraxkor stood nearby, its massive form casting a shadow over the ruins. Workers moved cautiously around the dragon-like beast, some still wary despite its role in the fight. Nathan approached it, placing a hand on its warm, scaled side. "You did good," he said softly. Vraxkor let out a low rumble, almost like a purr, and nudged him gently with its snout. It was clear the bond between them had grown stronger during the battle. They weren't just allies anymore. They were partners. As Nathan examined the damage, Clara joined him, her arms crossed and her expression grim. "We can fix this," she said, gesturing to the broken structures. "But we can't. Keep fighting like this forever. Sooner or later she'll send something bigger, something we can't stop." Nathan nodded. He knew she was right. The drones had been relentless, but they were only the beginning. The Empress wouldn't take this defeat lightly. She would come back with everything she had, and next time, it might not be enough to rely on Vraxkor alone. "We need a plan," Nathan said finally. "Something that will make her think twice about attacking us again." Clara raised an eyebrow. "And what exactly do you have in mind?" "We're not exactly an army, Nathan. Most of us barely know how to hold a weapon." "I'm not talking about fighting her head on," Nathan replied. "I'm talking about hitting her where it hurts. her control over Vraxkor. If we can prove to her that she can't use Vraxkor against us anymore, maybe she'll leave us alone. Clara frowned, considering his words. Even if we could pull that off, how do you plan to get close enough to do anything? She's not going to sit back and let us waltz into her territory. Nathan hesitated. He didn't have all the answers yet, but he knew one thing. They couldn't wait for the Empress to make the next move. They had to act first. We'll figure it out, he said firmly. For now, let's focus on repairing the outpost and getting everyone ready. If we can buy ourselves some time, we might stand a chance. Over the next few days, the workers threw themselves into rebuilding. Broken walls were patched up, shattered windows replaced, and damaged equipment repaired as best they could. Nathan spent most of his time working with Vraxkor, testing new ways to strengthen their bond and refine the glowing orb. He also began brainstorming ideas for confronting the Empress directly. It was risky, but he knew it was their best shot. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, Nathan sat beside Vraxkor, staring out at the barren landscape. The dragon-like beast lay quietly beside him, its glowing eyes reflecting the fading light. We've got to end this, Nathan muttered, more to himself than to Vraxkor. If we don't, she'll keep coming after us, and eventually we won't be able to stop her. Vraxkor shifted slightly, turning its head to look at him. Nathan sighed. I know I'm talking crazy, but what choice do we have? Sitting here, waiting for her to attack isn't going to work. We've got to take the fight to her. The idea formed slowly, piece by piece. What if they could use Vraxkor to infiltrate the Empress's stronghold? If they could disable the systems controlling other creatures like Vraxkor, or even sabotage her fleet, they might be able to cripple her forces. It was dangerous, but it was possible. And with Vraxkor's help, they might actually stand a chance. The next morning, Nathan gathered the workers in the makeshift meeting area outside the outpost. Vraxkor stood nearby, its presence drawing nervous glances from some of the group. Nathan cleared his throat, stepping forward to address them. Listen up, he began. We all know the Empress isn't done with us. She'll be back, and when she comes, she'll bring everything she has. If we want to survive, we can't just sit here and wait. Murmurs rippled through the crowd, but Nathan pressed on. We've got something she doesn't expect, an ally. He gestured to Vraxkor. Together we can hit her where it hurts. If we can get inside her stronghold and disrupt her control over Vraxkor and her other weapons, we might be able to end this once and for all. The workers exchanged uncertain looks. Some seemed intrigued by the idea, while others looked skeptical. One man stepped forward, shaking his head. That's suicide, he said bluntly. We're miners, not soldiers. How are we supposed to take on someone like the Empress? We don't have to fight her entire army, Nathan replied. All we need is one strike, a single operation that shows her we're not helpless. If we succeed, she might back off, and if we fail... He paused, choosing his words carefully. Then at least we'll have tried. The man frowned but didn't argue further. Slowly, others began nodding, agreeing with Nathan's logic. They didn't have many options, and sitting around waiting for the next attack wasn't appealing to anyone. By the end of the meeting, a plan had taken shape. A small team would accompany Nathan and Vraxkor to infiltrate the Empress's stronghold. Their mission was simple: disable her control systems and create enough chaos to force her retreat. Preparing for the mission was no easy task. The workers scavenged parts to build portable versions of the glowing orb, hoping to disrupt any control collars they encountered. Weapons were distributed, though most of the team had little experience using them. Nathan drilled everyone tirelessly, teaching them basic tactics and emphasizing the importance of staying calm under pressure. Meanwhile, he continued working, with Vraxkor, training the beast to respond to commands quickly and quietly. On the eve of their departure, Nathan stood alone at the edge of the outpost, staring up at the stars. Vraxkor joined him, settling down beside him with a soft thud. Tomorrow's the big day, Nathan said quietly. If this works, we might actually have a chance. If it doesn't, well, let's just hope it does. Vraxkor let out a low growl, nudging Nathan gently with its snout. Nathan smiled faintly, patting the beast's side. "Thanks for sticking with me," he said. "I couldn't have done any of this without you." The next morning, the team gathered at the outskirts of the outpost, ready to begin their journey. Nathan climbed onto Vraxcor's back, clutching the modified orb tightly in his hand. The others watched nervously as the dragon-like beast spread its wings and took to the air, carrying Nathan high above the ground. Below them, the rest of the team followed on foot, moving cautiously toward the coordinates they had identified as the location of the Empress's stronghold. The flight was tense, but uneventful. From the air, Nathan could see the vast expanse of the planet stretching out beneath them, dotted with jagged cliffs and endless stretches of barren land. As they drew closer to their destination, the terrain grew more rugged, marked by deep canyons and towering rock formations. Finally, they spotted it, a massive fortress carved into the side of a mountain, its metallic surface gleaming in the sunlight. Guards patrolled the perimeter, and ships hovered in the sky, ready to defend against intruders. Nathan signaled for Vraxcor to descend, landing near a cluster of rocks where the rest of the team waited. "This is it," he whispered, his voice tight with anticipation. "Stay sharp, everyone. We've got one shot at this." The team nodded, their expressions resolute despite the fear in their eyes. Together, they moved toward the fortress, guided by Nathan and Vraxcor. It was a long shot, but they were determined to see it through. Whatever happened next, they knew they couldn't afford to fail. The fortress loomed ahead, its metallic walls glinting ominously in the sunlight. Nathan and the team crouched behind a cluster of rocks, their eyes fixed on the structure. Guards patrolled the perimeter, their weapons ready, while ships hovered above like vultures waiting to strike. It was clear the Empress wasn't taking any chances. This place was a fortress in every sense of the word, designed to keep intruders out and protect whatever secrets lay inside. Nathan glanced at Vraxcor, who stood silently beside him, its glowing eyes scanning the area. The dragon-like beast seemed to sense the tension in the air, its tail flicking slightly as it waited for Nathan's command. "All right," Nathan whispered, turning to the team. "We stick to the plan. Clara and I will go in with Vraxcor. The rest of you stay here, and cover us if things go wrong." Clara nodded, her face pale but determined. The others exchanged nervous looks but didn't argue. They knew this was risky, but they also knew they had no other choice. If they could disable the Empress's control systems, they might stand a chance of ending this conflict once and for all. Taking a deep breath, Nathan climbed onto Vraxcor's back, signaling for Clara to follow. She hesitated for a moment, clearly uneasy about riding the massive creature, but eventually climbed up behind Nathan. "Let's do this," she muttered, gripping the edges of Vraxcor's scales tightly. With a powerful beat of its wings, Vraxcor launched itself into the air, soaring toward the fortress. Below them, the rest of the team stayed hidden, watching anxiously as the dragon-like beast approached the stronghold. As they drew closer, Nathan spotted a narrow ledge near the top of the mountain where they could land unnoticed. He guided Vraxcor toward it, and the beast landed gracefully, folding its wings neatly against its sides. "Stay close," Nathan said quietly as he and Clara slid off Vraxcor's back. The dragon-like beast lowered itself slightly, ready to move at a moment's notice. Together, the three of them moved cautiously along the ledge, heading toward a small opening in the fortress wall. The entrance was guarded by 2 soldiers, their weapons slung over their shoulders as they chatted. Idly, Nathan signaled for Clara to hang back while he crept forward, careful to stay out of sight. When he was close enough, he reached into his backpack and pulled out one of the modified orbs. Activating it, he aimed it at the guards. A burst of energy shot out, hitting them squarely and knocking them unconscious before they could react. "Clear," Nathan whispered, motioning for Clara and Vraxcor to join him. They slipped through the opening and into the fortress, finding themselves in a long, dimly lit corridor. The air was cool and metallic, and the faint hum of machinery echoed through the halls. "This way," Nathan said, leading the group deeper into the structure. He had studied the layout of the fortress during their journey, memorizing the locations of key systems. Their first target was the control room, a central hub where the Empress managed her operations. If they could disable it, they could cripple her ability to coordinate attacks. The corridors were eerily quiet, save for the occasional patrol passing by. Each time they encountered guards, Nathan used the orb to incapacitate them quickly and quietly. Vraxkor proved invaluable, using its size and strength to block doorways or create distractions when needed. Clara stayed close, keeping watch and ready to act if anything went wrong. Finally, they reached the control room. The door was sealed shut, but Nathan quickly set to work bypassing the lock. His fingers flew over the keypad, entering commands until the door slid open with a soft hiss. Inside, rows of monitors displayed live feeds from drones, ships, and other facilities under the Empress's control. At the center of the room was a large console, glowing with lights and covered in switches and buttons. "This is it," Nathan said, his voice barely above a whisper. "If we can shut this down, we'll disrupt her entire network." Clara nodded, pulling out another orb to help. Together, they began disabling the systems, targeting key components that controlled communications, surveillance, and weapon deployment. Sparks flew as circuits overloaded and alarms blared throughout the fortress. Within minutes, the room was plunged into chaos. "We've got company," Clara shouted, pointing to the doorway where several guards appeared, weapons drawn. Nathan grabbed the last orb and hurled it at them, sending a wave of energy that knocked them off their feet. "Let's move," he yelled, grabbing Clara's arm and pulling her toward the exit. Vraxkor roared loudly, drawing attention away from them as they fled down the corridor. Behind them, the sound of footsteps grew louder as more guards gave chase. Nathan's heart raced as he ran, clutching the orb tightly in his hand. They couldn't afford to be caught. Not now, not after coming so far. Reaching the ledge where they had landed earlier, Nathan whistled sharply, signaling for Vraxkor to join them. The dragon-like beast appeared moments later, spreading its wings wide. "Get on!" Nathan shouted, helping Clara climb onto Vraxkor's back before jumping on himself. As soon as they were settled, Vraxkor took off, soaring into the sky just as a swarm of drones emerged from the fortress, firing beams of energy in their direction. Nathan clung tightly to the beast's scales, shouting instructions to guide it through the barrage. Clara held on for dear life, her knuckles white as she gripped the edges of Vraxkor's scales. "They're gaining on us," Clara yelled, glancing over her shoulder at the pursuing drones. "Hold on," Nathan replied, reaching into his backpack and pulling out the final orb. Activating it, he aimed it at the nearest drone, unleashing a burst of energy that sent it spiraling out of control. One by one, the drones fell, their systems disrupted by the orb's signal. But there were too many of them, and Nathan knew they couldn't keep this up forever. Just when it seemed like they were out of options, a loud explosion rocked the fortress below. Flames erupted from the control room, sending plumes of smoke billowing into the sky. The sabotage had worked. The fortress's systems were collapsing and the remaining drones faltered as their connection to the Empress's network was severed. Vraxkor let out a triumphant roar, banking sharply as it carried Nathan and Clara away from the chaos. Behind them, the fortress crumbled, its once mighty walls reduced to rubble. The team on the ground cheered as they watched the destruction unfold, knowing they had struck a devastating blow against the Empress. But Nathan knew this wasn't the end. The Empress herself was still out there, and she wouldn't take this defeat lightly. As they flew back toward the outpost, he couldn't shake the feeling that their fight was far from over. Still, for now, they had won. And with Vraxkor by his side, Nathan felt ready to face whatever came next. The journey back to the outpost was quiet, the weight of what they had accomplished hanging heavy in the air. Nathan sat atop Vraxkor's back, his body aching from the chaos of the mission, but his mind racing with thoughts of what lay ahead. Clara clung to him tightly, her breathing still uneven from the adrenaline rush of their escape. Below them, the barren landscape stretched endlessly, the fortress now just a distant column of smoke on the horizon. When they finally landed near the outpost, the rest of the team greeted them with cheers and shouts of relief. The workers rushed forward, patting Vraxkor's side and congratulating Nathan and Clara for their success. For the first time in days, there was a sense of hope, a belief that maybe, Just maybe, they could survive this fight. But Nathan knew better than to let his guard down. The destruction of the fortress had been a victory, yes, but it wasn't the end. The Empress herself was still out there, and she wouldn't take the loss of her stronghold lightly. "We've bought ourselves some time," Nathan said, addressing the group as they gathered around. "But she'll come after us again, and next time it'll be worse." The workers exchanged uneasy looks, but no one argued. They had seen enough to know he was right. Still, there was a newfound determination among them. They had faced impossible odds and won. If they could do it once, they could do it again. Over. The next few days, the outpost buzzed with activity as the workers prepared for the inevitable retaliation. Barricades were reinforced, weapons repaired, and traps set up around the perimeter. Nathan spent most of his time with Vraxcor, testing new ways to improve their bond and refine the glowing orb. He also began working on a plan to confront the Empress directly. It was risky, but he knew it was their best chance at ending this conflict once and for all. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, Nathan stood beside Vraxcor, staring out at the rocky plains. The dragon-like beast rested quietly beside him, its glowing eyes reflecting the fading light. "We can't keep running," Nathan muttered, more to himself than to Vraxcor. "If we want to stop her, we have to face her head-on." Vraxcor tilted its head, studying him curiously. Nathan sighed. "I know it's crazy, but if we don't try, she'll just keep coming after us, and sooner or later we'll run out of places to hide." The idea formed slowly, piece by piece. What if they could use Vraxcor to infiltrate the Empress's flagship? If they could disable her command systems or even capture her, they might be able to end this war for good. It was dangerous, but it was possible. And with Vraxcor's help, they might actually stand a chance. The next morning, Nathan gathered the workers in the makeshift meeting area outside the outpost. Vraxcor stood nearby, its massive form casting a long shadow over the ground. "Listen up," Nathan began. "The Empress isn't done with us. She'll be back, and when she comes, she'll bring everything she has. If we want to survive, we can't just sit here and wait." Murmurs rippled through the crowd, but Nathan pressed on. "We've got something she doesn't expect. An ally." He gestured to Vraxcor. "Together, we can hit her where it hurts. If we can get inside her flagship and take her down, we might be able to end this once and for all." The workers exchanged uncertain looks. Some seemed intrigued by the idea, while others looked skeptical. One man stepped forward, shaking his head. "That's suicide," he said bluntly. "How are we supposed to take on someone like the Empress?" "We don't have to fight her entire army," Nathan replied. "All we need is one strike, a single operation that shows her we're not helpless. If we succeed, she might back off. And if we fail—" He paused, choosing his words carefully. "Then at least we'll have tried." The man frowned but didn't argue further. Slowly, others began nodding, agreeing with Nathan's logic. They didn't have many options, and sitting around waiting for the next attack wasn't appealing to anyone. By the end of the meeting, a plan had taken shape. A small team would accompany Nathan and Vraxcor to infiltrate the Empress's flagship. Their mission was simple: disable her command systems and force her retreat, or if possible, capture her. Preparing for the mission was no easy task. The workers scavenged parts to build portable versions of the glowing orb, hoping to disrupt any control collars they encountered. Weapons were distributed, though most of the team had little experience using them. Nathan drilled everyone tirelessly, teaching them basic tactics and emphasizing the importance of staying calm under pressure. Meanwhile, he continued working, with Vraxcor, training the beast to respond to commands quickly and quietly. On the eve of their departure, Nathan stood alone at the edge of the outpost, staring up at the stars. Vraxcor joined him, settling down beside him with a soft thud. "Tomorrow's the big day," Nathan said quietly. "If this works, we might actually have a chance. If it doesn't, well, let's just hope it does." Vraxcor let out a low growl, nudging Nathan gently with its snout. Nathan smiled faintly, patting the beast's side. "Thanks for sticking with me," he said. "I couldn't have done any of this without you." The next morning, the team gathered at the outskirts of the outpost, ready to begin their journey. Nathan climbed onto Vraxkor's back, clutching the modified orb tightly in his hand. The others watched nervously as the dragon-like beast spread its wings and took to the air, carrying Nathan high above the ground. Below them, the rest of the team followed on foot, moving cautiously toward the coordinates they had identified as the location of the Empress's flagship. The flight was tense but uneventful. From the air, Nathan could see the vast expanse of the planet stretching out beneath them, dotted with jagged cliffs and endless stretches of barren land. As they drew closer to their destination, the terrain grew more rugged, marked by deep canyons and towering rock formations. Finally, they spotted it, a massive ship hovering in the sky, its sleek metallic surface gleaming in the sunlight. Guards patrolled the perimeter and smaller vessels darted around it, ready to defend against intruders. Nathan signaled for Vraxkor to descend, landing near a cluster of rocks where the rest of the team waited. "This is it," he whispered, his voice tight with anticipation. "Stay sharp, everyone. We've got one shot at this." The team nodded, their expressions resolute despite the fear in their eyes. Together they moved toward the ship, guided by Nathan and Vraxkor. It was a long shot, but they were determined to see it through. Whatever happened next, they knew they couldn't afford to fail. Reaching the ship's docking bay, Nathan used the orb to disable the guards stationed there. With Vraxkor's help, they slipped inside, navigating the labyrinthine corridors of the flagship. The air was cold and sterile, the hum of machinery echoing through the halls. Finally, they reached the command center, where the Empress herself awaited them. She stood tall and imposing, her expression cold and calculating. "You've caused me a great deal of trouble," she said, her voice dripping with disdain, "but your rebellion ends here." Nathan stepped forward, holding the orb tightly in his hand. "It doesn't have to be this way," he said. "Let us go, and we'll leave you alone. Keep fighting, and we'll destroy everything you've built." The Empress laughed, a harsh, bitter sound. "You think you can stop me? You're nothing but insects." With that, she signaled for her guards to attack. Chaos erupted as the team fought back, using the orbs to disable weapons and clear a path. Nathan and Vraxkor focused on the Empress, dodging her attacks and countering with bursts of energy from the orb. The battle was intense, but Nathan refused to give up. This was their chance to end it, to stop the cycle of destruction once and for all. Finally, with a final surge of energy, Nathan disabled the Empress's weapon, leaving her defenseless. She stared at him, her expression a mix of shock and fury. "You may have won this time," she spat, "but this isn't over." Nathan shook his head. "It is for now." With the Empress captured and her flagship in ruins, the team returned to the outpost, victorious but weary. The workers celebrated, but Nathan knew the fight wasn't truly over. There would always be challenges, always be threats. But for now they had peace, and that was enough. As he stood beside Vraxkor watching the sun rise over the horizon, Nathan felt a sense of pride. They had faced the impossible and triumphed. Together, they had proven that even the smallest acts of courage could change the course of history. And with Vraxkor by his side, Nathan knew they were ready for whatever came next.